Okay, so this video is primarily going to be talking about Sanji, one of the main characters in One Piece. We are finally here at one of the most important videos in my entire lineup so far. I'm saying that because Sanji is a character that definitely connects back to so many different elements in the show and basically every video I've made to date. That being said, most of the video will use information that's already been shown in the anime or talked about in my previous videos, but there are a few details that will be mentioned briefly that are sourced from the most recent chapters going up to the most recent Sanji chapter 1034. I'll put spoiler tags to skip certain sections, and the video should still make sense for those who aren't caught up, but like I've been saying, this is a time to be caught up if you aren't caught up to the manga. But okay, Sanji is one of the main characters in One Piece, considered by many as the third strongest on the Straw Hat crew, or equal to or in some perspectives stronger than Zoro. The stereotypes I hear about Sanji often is that he's either a wimp or a simp because of his running gag trait and how he treats women and approaches women, which to some can take away from his seriousness as a character, and for others even straight out dismiss him as a character deserving of a leadership position or conqueror's haki. To others, it could just be seen as annoying, and it can sometimes be overdone. I think that, like I demonstrated in my Usopp video, Sanji is a character with a profound amount of detail and effort incorporated into all aspects of his design that have provided us with incredible plot points and clues for what Sanji will end up becoming by the end of the series. The way I view the world is by making connections, so let me connect you to my vision, the Par vision. So just reinforcing the amount of detail that Sanji probably has, fun fact, we know Sanji was a cook pretty much raised in the floating restaurant Bratier. This is actually the name of a restaurant that Oda worked part-time at before becoming a manga artist. In terms of connections, there's so many places where we can start from when talking about Sanji. We could start from his family, his eyebrows, his powers, his behavior, his various representations. Also, I'm going to say something ridiculous and it's kind of clickbait, but Sanji has the strongest move we've seen in the Straw Hats. Yes, stronger than Luffy and Zoro relative to when we saw them at the time of this move. You're actually going to be so mad when I finally say what it is, but Sanji is also high-key one of the smartest and strongest characters in the show. Amongst things I want to talk about in the video, I will definitely be talking about the number 3 every once in a while, and I'm definitely going to have to make extensions to this video. There's honestly so many things to talk about, but I think one of the main things for Sanji that connects everything is emotions and his name. Hold that thought. His name? Yes, his name. No, not that one. This one. Yes, if you didn't already know this, Vinsmoke Sanji's original first name was going to be Naruto. And I'm not sure if he was named Naruto, if Oda would have kept Vinsmoke as the last name, but Oda changed it to avoid confusion and give respect towards Kishimoto's Naruto franchise. That being said, I wanted to start here because yes, I do think Sanji's name carries importance. But the name Naruto must be some sort of indication as to some core concept with Sanji. It's also interesting because originally Sanji's design had him have 2 guns, and personally I think that would have been really cool and interesting in the context of the Vinsmoke family. But okay, what clue can the name Naruto give us? Believe it or not, it might relate to his eyebrows. So we associate the name Naruto Uzumaki with this symbol, which already reminds us of Sanji's eyebrows. Uzumaki means spiral or whirlpool, but Naruto can also be a reference to Naruto Maki, which are fish cake slices usually put in ramen that looks like this, with the spiral. And we know that Sanji loves seafood, and that's the connection. Yep, that's everything. Nah, I'm joking. So these fish cakes were actually meant to resemble the Naruto whirlpools in Japan, and I think that's the actual inspiration for why Naruto would have been a relevant name for Sanji. This is a visual representation of the currents in the Naruto Strait that create the Naruto whirlpools in between Naruto and Awaji Island, with the Naruto Bridge spanning the distance between them. You can already see why I think this is probably the actual inspiration for Sanji and the Vinsmoke eyebrows. In terms of swirls, there's not too many examples that I can think of that are 2 stagnant swirl designs besides yin and yang, but this seems like the actual inspiration. And before I get into Sanji, there's a lot to unpack here. So if I haven't already emphasized this video will be way better understood if you watch all the videos that led up to here. I would highly recommend viewing all my previous videos, but so a lot of my videos are trying to gain an understanding of the origin of devil fruits and connecting really interesting concepts of haki and comparing them to devil fruit powers, while presenting the idea that non-devil fruit powers and peak haki are possible sources for future devil fruit creations. Also, the overall concept that I was trying to demonstrate was that it seems like devil fruits, rather than containing actual devils, contain forbidden knowledge. This is supported by the interesting way things are named gods, demons, devils, and curses throughout One Piece, which might support the idea that devil fruits were named through some misinformation provided by the world government, who had the power to rewrite history as they saw fit after the Void Century. But so far, it feels rather than some sort of devil actually possessing the fruit, it's more so that the devil fruit provides knowledge rather than an ability. It provides the consumer with peak knowledge about its relevant ability and gives the user mastery over whatever ability they received. If that's confusing to you, watch my most recent video on pre-devil fruit powers shown in One Piece. I'm thinking about naming this group of people devil seed users, since they might be the seeds for future fruits. There's even more reasons connecting back to my old Vegapunk video. It makes sense that the smartest and most knowledgeable characters in the world are dabbling in recreating devil fruits, and one that has actually harnessed devil fruit powers and manipulated them is Vegapunk. A main reason I think devil fruits pass on knowledge is because of this connection. Besides the D-Clan, who was another group of people that was demonized by the world government? Ohara. And what were Ohara researchers demonized for? Their knowledge or potential knowledge. So if the researchers were the devils in this analogy, then their knowledge was the fruit. And how fitting was it that they were situated in a tree? So there's a lot I want to talk about and expand on with devil fruits regarding why they may look the way they do, their origins, their purpose, and so much more. But I'll get to that in another video. So why am I even talking about this in a Sanji video? Well, yes, the obvious is Sanji and the Vinsmoke eyebrows, but it was specifically this SBS answer that Oda gave in chapter 436 to the question, do all devil fruits have this swirly pattern on them? And Oda responded, yes, they do. That's one of their features, it seems. There are times that I think that Sanji himself is a devil fruit. It's not a secret that the fruits share the same swirly design as Sanji's eyebrows. So now circling back to the whirlpool references using Naruto, so the Naruto whirlpools I think reference energy, flow, and control. For these whirlpools to form, the main current provides primary energy and smaller periphery currents help create these major whirlpools. But also the whirlpools alter directions depending on the water levels of the northern current versus the southern current. Depending on the time of day and the gravitational pull of the sun and the moon, the currents will be altered. The sun and moon relevance will be discussed in a future video, but just wanting to note that Zoro has a lot of associations with the moon, and in recent chapters Luffy has been referenced to resemble a fire or sun god in Wano, so maybe Sanji represents the ebb and flow between them and grounds them by representing the Earth, a planet that takes the offerings of both to create the endless potentials created by life and nature. Or maybe Sanji could also represent the sun as a primary source of energy, a point I'll elaborate on at the end of the video. But maybe the swirls on the devil fruit reference the flow of knowledge, a transfer and mixture of information being stored in an object. And also going back to Oda's comment of Sanji being a devil fruit, this is where some connections are made. So throwing out my theory part first, I've talked about how the monster trio seems to represent different aspects of power and energy, and they're all strong but in different ways. The one I spoke the most about in previous videos was Zoro and his ability to understand energy, and his actual need to understand energies to be a top swordsman, because he might be able to cut all kinds of energy as long as he can sense it. Luffy being a rubber man is someone who is able to resist energy and tolerate energy, whereas Sanji might be the member that can create flow, which is why in my elemental hockey video I labeled him the Avatar, master of all elements. All of this also might relate to another SBS Oda had in chapter 55 in regards to Sanji's eyebrows. Oda answered, all people owe their lives to circling. The sun and the moon and the earth all go around in circles. What if the circling of the earth suddenly stopped? The whole world would be deluged by gigantic waves and there would be a terrible disaster. So remember that Sanji's eyebrows have that kind of energy. I'll talk about this more later on and in a future video. I have a really exciting tinfoil hat theory that connects this stuff to Roger, and it's pretty cool. Before I go on though, I want to add one more side note that becomes relevant later on, but goes back to the Naruto whirlpools. This detail might relate back to Sanji's name, but like his actual name this time. Despite having to change his name to Sanji, I feel like maybe there's something else that could be learned here. So just based on the character G, I saw a similarity to Awaji Island, which is across the land of Naruto. Awaji translated means the road or path to Awa, so G in this context refers to road or path to, which is interesting in Sanji's context. And Awa has several meanings. These are the words that came in when translating this part. It was light, faint, pale. I think it could also refer to a rice field. I want to clarify I'm not an expert in Japanese. It'd be nice to have someone more familiar with Japanese language in my Discord. But we know Oda loves to use puns and multiple meanings when using words, and the one that made that fit something related to Sanji was light. So meaning the Naruto bridge leads to the path of light. And when I think of light, I usually lean towards knowledge, as something is enlightening or wondrous. I think this might be an interesting point for a few reasons that I'll discuss later on. So that being said, the other connection made here is that all the top scientists seemed obsessed with harnessing these various energies. Whether it's Chopper creating rumble balls that affect the wavelength of devil fruit energies, emphasis on the wave, which side note is Nami in Japanese. Again, we'll talk about in a future video. But not just Chopper, looking at Caesar, who is attempting to recreate devil fruits through smiles, and then Vegapunk, who recreated Kaido's fruit, but both of their fruits, instead of having a spiral, has a circle, and we know both have some sort of shortcoming compared to natural devil fruits, and this lack of spiral design might be a key aspect in that. In the smiles case, the zoans it produces seem to not be able to control the flow of the energy, and are forced to have permanent animal changes rather than hybrid or optional transformations. We also see Vegapunk recreate Kizaru's lasers in the Pacifistas, for example. Who knows what other powers he may try to recreate through technology, but he has also been shown to have success in putting devil fruits into inanimate objects. If you put this into context of devil fruits giving knowledge, then that might be why inanimate objects have only been seen to consume Zoan fruits, because unlike Paramecia and Logia fruits, Zoan fruits are tied to providing knowledge about life forms. That life aspect is probably important, and so if you contrast what Judge has done with his kids, then you kind of see the opposite direction here. Noting that both Judge and Vegapunk were on the same MADS team, researching lineage factors. Under the possible duress of the world government, Vegapunk has pursued imbuing lineage factors into inanimate objects and recreating the fruits using lineage factors. Judge, on the other hand, went into copying with cloning and augmentation with his children. His augmentation led to where the kids have swirls on their eyebrows. We don't know if Judge has the swirl, but we know Sora, Sanji's mom, does not have the swirl, so we can kind of eliminate that it was hereditary. It makes more sense to me that the spirals were a result of the augmentations and the spirals indicating a connection to devil fruits. We know that Vegapunk was trying to put Zoan devil fruits into inanimate objects. What if the different route that Judge wanted to go was to put Paramecia and Logia type fruits into live objects? I'll talk about the Vinsmokes and more specifically Judge in a separate video, but that gives us a good enough base to focus back onto Sanji, talking more specifically about what makes him special. So Judge wanted to imbue certain traits. Queen noted them to be a human body with a strong exoskeleton, abnormal regeneration, physical strength, and a heart of ice. Judge specifically said by wielding the concentrated powers of advanced science, you are born to be greater than human. You will be unbound by the foolish, naive ways of the world, and then saying rule Germa with the ever-evolving power of science. The cost of these powers, which the amount of the price depends on the perspective apparently, but Judge gave these powers to his kids by some genetic surgery that sacrificed their emotions for these powers. Emotions being what Judge probably was referring to when he says foolish, naive ways of the world. Emotions is key, and is key to Sanji, and key to everything, even the devil fruit part we were talking about earlier. But let's talk about Sanji and emotions. This is honestly where the details start piling on and connecting back to the story and leading towards an understanding of why I'm even talking about any of this. So let's talk about some background on Sanji. Oda says that Sanji would be French in the real world. Like all the other Straw Hat characters, I think this is significant towards where we should look for clues for the character. Sanji is full of love for women and cooking to the point where some would consider it a distraction, mainly talking about Zoro here. Sanji's emotional aspect is highlighted even more when contrasted with Zoro. Zoro has been noted to throw away his earthly desires so that he could focus, so that there would be no distractions in his swordsmanship. He believes they are unnecessary, but still ultimately follows a similar path as Sanji, despite Sanji being the polar opposite. Instead of throwing away his emotions, Sanji immerses himself in them. He at times lets his emotions take control of him. I love this dichotomy because it really shows how two people who are polar opposites can end up on the same path and reach the same conclusions. This was extremely highlighted in Water 7 when Usopp was leaving the crew. We saw Sanji and Zoro come to the same conclusions despite normally being polar opposites in their mindset. This parallel is also a dichotomy of a state of depression and a state of anxiety. Zoro's depression has been noted through his alcoholism, which is a depressant, but also many people have noted that we rarely get to see Zoro even smile post time skip, whereas Sanji is the state of anxiety, and we really see the anxiety spiral during the Whole Cake Island arc. Sanji had to balance his crew's mission, his family's burden, his foster father's safety, his own happiness, and so many other elements, forcing Sanji to panic and isolate himself and make decisions that Luffy knew were wrong, and even his estranged sister. We also saw more of this anxiety in the most recent fights with Sanji and Wano, where Sanji was faced with the predicament of losing his emotions and went into a panic state and had to escape the situation to reassess himself. Losing his emotions was a severe trauma trigger for him because emotions are his core strength and what his father hated him for as a child. As a kid, Sanji simply wanted to pursue his passions and was beaten or bullied at every turn by his ice-hearted siblings. Sanji could have chosen to give up, but he persevered through so much to survive. Sanji's mom fought to give Sanji emotions, and Sanji suffered through so much being held together by the same thing that he was ostracized for, his heart. Sanji wasn't just a normal kid either. In my opinion, throughout One Piece, we see how inhumane royalty is and can be. Usually the average royal members or celestial dragons don't have the body to back it up, but because of the genetic modifications to also make the Vinsmoke superhuman, the brothers became inhuman in almost all senses of the word. Sanji, on the other hand, wasn't just a normal human physically, but he was the furthest thing from royal mentality, as he cared for animals and went as far as making food for rats, having Judge interrupt him and exclaim that royalty does not serve. Judge later in Whole Cake Island questions why Luffy even values Sanji, saying Sanji is the failure of Germa, his skin is not armor, he busies himself with menial cooking, he has no royal pride, he is swayed by emotions and exposes himself to danger for the sake of the weak, his mentality is soft, and he is flawed as a soldier. Luffy was extremely confused and questioned why Judge listed Sanji's best qualities as if they were bad. I think this juxtaposition of human values is actually highlighted by a famous French philosopher, René Descartes. So Judge's mentality on creating perfect humans was based on a more ancient philosophy, where it was believed that passions and emotions were distractions from making decisions, summarizing that passions were something that were more impulsive and something that needed to be controlled, whereas Descartes was one of the first philosophers to propose that passions were a vital mechanism in functioning as a human being. In his book, Passions of the Soul, he outlined that passions were actually what moves the soul, noting that the type of passion demonstrated could change your complexion's color, body temperature, and blood circulation. Descartes claimed that there were 6 basic passions: wonder, desire, love and hatred, and joy and sadness. All other emotions are derivatives and mixtures of these primary passions, according to Descartes. We literally see all of these in full force within Sanji. We see time and time again how Sanji's body literally moves due to his passions, regardless of what it is. We know that Sanji is most passionate about women and cooking, and will stop at nothing to complete whatever task or mission that is relevant to either subject. I think that one of the most interesting lines in the book that connects back to what I want to talk about in regards to Sanji is what Descartes claims to be a requisite for being a master of their passions. Descartes does not disagree that passions can sometimes be out of control, but it's not erasing them that allows for true evolution. It's more in line of taming the passions with your thoughts, which connects back really well to probably one of the most famous quotes, "I think, therefore I am." He says that an effective way of countering an undesirable passion is to imagine a new and different state of affairs, or response to the state of affairs. This process of reimagining your passions allows you to then shape the internal body to produce specific passions under the appropriate, rationally endorsed circumstances. Exercising control of the body means control of the internal motions of the body, such as the beating of the heart, circulation of the blood, and heat. All of this is literally the growth we saw in Sanji going in and coming out of Fishman Island. Sanji's passion for women put him out of commission, and through the mental training provided by Chopper and Sanji's control, he was able to prevent deathly nosebleeds. Once Sanji saw Shirahoshi, he reimagined his dream and fixed his brain. He no longer had the nosebleed problem, which ironically enough, the nosebleeds from stimulating situations in anime, specifically fan service situations, was a running gag that apparently stemmed from the idea that Japan had a high blood pressure problem, which resulted in nosebleeds. This method is what Descartes claims as a way to remedy and tame the passions, but the prerequisite for being a master of one's passion, according to Descartes, was generosity. Descartes says to be generous, one has to be experienced and knowledgeable about what is truly important for oneself. Generous people do good without self-interest, are courteous, gracious, and obliging, and live free from contempt, jealousy, envy, hatred, fear, and anger for others. If this doesn't sound like Sanji to you, it definitely will soon. The most standout proclamation of Sanji's kindness is when Reiju told Sanji that because of the way he was born, he was a human who had the most gentle and kindest soul. But even more than that, we see this concept in almost all aspects of his actions. The other key example is with Viola, where Viola used peeping mind to search Sanji's thoughts and only saw the vulgarity of his mind. In a woke world, that would be problematic, but if Sanji's thoughts were so blinding that Viola freaked out, and if that was the standard for Sanji's thoughts at any time he's seen a woman, and he's never harmed a woman, then we can say pretty strongly that Sanji is definitely someone who has tamed his passions, or at the minimum has control over himself. But even more so, in this moment, Sanji is acting extremely generously. He is acting without self-interest, knowing he could die behind enemy lines. He had no hatred for Viola, no fear or anger. You know what brought him there? Tears. I mentioned in previous videos that tears played an important role in One Piece. I actually want to make a separate video on just tears. But if you equate tears to sadness, then Descartes' notion that passions moves you is 100% supported by not just the love passions, but also the sadness passions. Sanji has this interesting quirk to be able to sense tears from a woman no matter how far. If they are suffering from some sort of traumatic experience, he cannot be stopped and his body rushes to save her, no matter who or what she is going through. And the craziest part is that Sanji wasn't the only person who demonstrated this passion-driven, action-based behavior. Odin also had this same quirk. This is actually how Odin discovered Toki. He was in the middle of a trial to join Whitebeard's crew, a trial so important to him the man let himself be dragged by a chain through an ocean for days. Odin wanted this so badly he had been trying to escape Wano for a majority of his life. But the moment he sensed a woman's shrieks, he abandoned everything to make sure Toki was safe, even though at the time he had no idea who she was, just that there was a woman in distress. I think this is important for so many reasons. The primary one being that we know Odin was one of the strongest in the verse, and particularly with Haki. He also demonstrated an unreal blind generosity, completely ignoring himself and dancing naked for 5 years for the sake of his people. In Wano, they called Haki Rio, which alludes to flow, and that is really important to the swirly idea, which we'll return to in a little bit. In terms of generosity though, Sanji also shared another similarity to Odin, but I'm only connecting it to Odin because of his respective position in the world in terms of willpower. This connection is cooking. Odin used cooking in an interesting way, and it served as a way he connected with people, even those who had passed away. In the first arc we learned about Sanji, we got a taste of his unyielding generosity when it comes to providing food. It stems from his hatred from wasted food, but also his personal experience having starved with Zeph while they were stranded. This created a formula where Sanji will serve anyone, ally or enemy, evil or good, poor or rich. It doesn't matter who they are because all people need to eat. Sanji will sacrifice his own desires when it comes to providing food. Just emphasizing this is still connected to emotions, Haki, everything we talked about. I actually think Sanji's cooking is his most powerful ability. But before moving on, I just want to circle back to one of the basic passions, wonder, because I think this one in particular relates to Sanji really well. Descartes explains the function of wonder like this: to learn and retain in our memory things of which we are previously ignorant. Wonder or admiration is defined as our response to something new without considering whether they are beneficial or harmful to us. I think Sanji really demonstrates this attention to new concepts and retains the memory of them. If you guys watched my observation Haki video, you may already see where I'm going with this point. One last really cool connection I want to make is that did you guys know that the word emotions actually originated in France? Before the word's introduction, feelings were described as passions or impulses or irrationalities. The etymology of the word emotions is really interesting. I mean, naturally you see the word emotions, kind of referring to the idea that they are feelings that move you or your soul. But what's even crazier is the word emotion comes from émouvoir, which means to stir up. What motion is stirring? Circular, creating a spiral. I guess Oda was right. All of life is circular. I have so much more that I want to talk about, and I'll bring up some points that won't nicely fit in this context, and there's a few things I'll save for another video. But now I want to start piecing some of these points together and really focusing on Sanji's future. So what powers will Sanji get? Well, let's get the easy ones out of the way first.